Hello, here's what's coming up on the world today. Shipwreck off Italy's Lampedusa island, 41 migrants killed. 9 bodies recovered after deadly fire in holiday home in France. Plus, Belém summit in Brazil failed to agree on a deal to end deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. We begin in Europe, where 41 migrants have died in a shipwreck off the Italian island of Lampedusa. A group of 4 people who survived the disaster told rescuers that they were on a boat that had set off from Sfax in Tunisia and sank on its way to Italy. The 4 survivors, originally from Côte d'Ivoire and Guinea, reached Lampedusa Wednesday. Consisting of 3 men and a woman, they told rescuers that they were on a boat carrying 45 people, including 3 children. They said the boat, which was about 20 feet long, left Tunisia Thursday last week, but sank within hours after being hit by a big wave. Only 15 people are understood to have been wearing life vests. More than 1,800 people have lost their lives so far this year in the crossing from North Africa to Europe. The Italian Coast Guard reported 2 shipwrecks in the area on Sunday, but it is not clear whether this vessel is one of those. Tunisian authorities say the port city, about 80 miles from Lampedusa, is a popular gateway for migrants seeking safety and a better life in Europe. In neighbouring France, 9 bodies have been found and 2 more people are feared dead after a fire at a holiday home hosting people with learning disabilities. Nearly 85 fighters were sent to the blaze in La Forge after emergency services were altered early on Wednesday. According to local officials, the missing people are considered potentially deceased, even as a search for the bodies is underway. The fire has now been extinguished, but its cause is not clear. 17 people were evacuated from the building, while at least 1 person has been taken to hospital. The fire broke out near Windsheim, close to the German border, about 70 kilometers south of the city of Strasbourg. And to other stories, 8 Amazon nations have agreed to a list of unified environmental policies and measures to bolster regional cooperation at a major rainforest summit in Brazil. However, they failed to agree on a common goal for ending deforestation. Delegates from the countries are meeting in the Brazilian city of Belém for a 2-day summit on the issue, the first such gathering in 14 years. A joint declaration on Tuesday created an alliance to combat deforestation, but left each country to pursue its own conservation goals. Preserving the Amazon is a central part of efforts to tackle climate change.
Leaders of Amazon nations projected an image of unity as they met to end its deforestation, but they had failed to agree on a deadline to do just that as their summit ended on Tuesday. The Belém summit gathered officials from Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, and more. The meeting in the Brazilian city brought together the members for the first time in 14 years.
It is the first time we have done so here in Para, and the first time in a context of severe worsening of the climate crisis. It has never been more urgent to resume and expand this cooperation. The challenges of our era and the opportunities that arise demand joint action.
The countries that made up the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization were expected to ink a pact to stop deforestation by 2030, a goal Brazil itself had adopted. Instead, members were left to pursue their own individual deforestation goals. Speaking to the media, Brazil's Foreign Minister Mario Vieira played down the division between the member countries.
We do not have a different position. The position is convergent, and each country will have to follow a pace that is within its reach. There are many countries in the world that still have an energy system totally dependent on coal and fossil fuels, obviously. They will be further away, but that doesn't mean they are against it, I assume.
Out in the streets gathered the indigenous peoples of the Amazon who marched against mining, oil drilling, and other so-called extractivist projects. We are here, marching and saying that we do not accept mining in our territory. We do not want oil exploitation in the Amazon, that this has already impacted the lives of our families in our territories. The Belém summit also did not fix a deadline on ending another threat to the forest, illegal gold mining. However, leaders agreed to cooperate on the issue and work together to police cross-border environmental crimes. The final joint statement, called the Belém Declaration, strongly asserted indigenous rights and protections and agreements on negotiating positions at climate summits.
Well, joining us to discuss more about this is Jan Bochat, VOA correspondent. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, after this, the summit, I think, left a feeling of frustration among the civil society, environmentalists, and even among some of the government representatives. The main issue in all this discussion, and the reason because all these countries didn't reach an agreement, was basically oil. Brazil wants to explore oil in the river mouth in the Amazon. They believe there are 30 billion barrels right there, and they want to explore it. Colombia, on the other side, doesn't want it. They want to stop all oil exploration in the Amazon. So because of this disagreement, Colombia and Brazil did not agree as well about the zero deforestation goal that was set by Brazil to finish in 2030.
So, Jan, thanks for just jumping right in, reacting to that report by our correspondent on that. But it seems that lots of agreements, I mean, as much as there are disagreements, there are also agreements. What is it, this agreement to list unified environmental policies, and does it help the Amazon?
Well, this was the first time that the presidents of the 8 countries of the Amazon region got together to discuss this situation. I think people are with a lot of hopes that a kind of a political bloc will be formed among these countries and other countries as well, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, that have like environments that are very similar to the Amazon, to unify a discourse, a voice, to talk with the rich countries. This was the main goal, I think, that was achieved in this summit. Brazil is leading it. They want to do it. Lula, the Brazilian president, wants to form this bloc, this environmental bloc, to discuss with the rich countries how to preserve the Amazon. We're going to see if it's going to work in the next UN COPs. The next one will be in next year, I think, and the biggest one will be in Belém, in Brazil, in 2025, the COP30.
We also see that indigenous people are sort of protesting. Talk to us about their demands, and, you know, is anyone listening?
Well, not a lot of people are listening the way they want to be listened. The indigenous people were under really, really big pressure here in Brazil and in all the Amazon region in the last years. Only in 2021, for example, 170 indigenous people were killed, murdered, during conflicts with invaders, illegal miners, people who are going to the indigenous land to try to grab their richness. There's a lot of gold mining going on in the Amazon region. There's a lot of farmers invading the indigenous areas. So the indigenous people are asking for protection and to be heard, but they don't think they're being heard as much as they want.
So when we look at all that has happened in these 2 days, how important would we say is the Belém discussion to the global fight on climate change?
Well, I think the most important thing that happened in the last days was this formation of this environmental bloc. Those countries, they need to get together to discuss with the rich countries how to find a way to stop deforestation. The Amazon region, it's very, very important for the environment of the world, and especially this area. If the Amazon is deforested, if we lose the Amazon, all this region will be dry, will be a savanna very soon. So this movement, this political movement, probably was the biggest achievement of the summit, and we're going to see if it's going to work or not in the next years.
Indeed, we will see indeed. We'd like to thank you, Jan Bochat, VOA correspondent. Thanks for joining us at this time.
Thank you.
Still to come on the program. Former US President Donald Trump slams charges against him, vows to keep talking about indictments. We have more to come. Stay with us. Welcome back. We continue in the United States, where police and barricades around the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia, as a possible fourth indictment of former U.S. President Donald Trump casts a shadow over the government building. This is where Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis is wrapping up an investigation into accusations Trump illegally pressured Georgia officials to overturn his 2020 election defeat. Willis has urged court employees to work remotely, with dozens of county sheriff's deputies stationed out front and other officers driving marked cars in circles around the streets nearby, trying to secure an area which could be the scene of future protests. The Georgia probe was opened January 2021, shortly after Trump was recorded on a phone call asking the state's top election official to find enough votes to overturn Democrat Joe Biden's victory. Trump has denied any wrongdoing and accused Willis, an elected Democrat, of political motives. An indictment in Georgia would mark Trump's fourth set of criminal charges this year. In the meantime, analysts say supporters of Donald Trump are unlikely to engage in organized violence at a Georgia courthouse where the former president may soon be indicted. Duke University professor David Shanzer, who directs the Triangle Center on Terrorism and Homeland Security, says that while organized unrest like that, which occurred on January 6, 2021, storming of the U.S. Capitol looks unlikely, heated political rhetoric may increase the chances of individual acts of violence.
Have really shown up to protest for the three other indictments. There's a little bit more hot rhetoric going on now as we're getting further into the presidential campaign, and in some ways as the indictments are getting even more serious. But I really, while there might be protesters, I really see no reason to suspect that there'll be violence directed at the courthouse, especially when there's going to be a big police presence there. I really think that, law enforcement, the FBI was caught off guard, was sleeping at the wheel January 6th. But then since then, we've had a really strong law enforcement reaction to January 6th. 1,000 arrests, serious prosecutions, people getting jail time. I don't think the people who were involved in the protests, I think they were shocked by that. And I don't think there are a lot of people who are really interested in doing some serious jail time to engage in these kind of activities. So I don't think the mass protests moving towards violence is very likely going forward. However, I do think as things get more heated and as the rhetoric gets sharper, I think it's very possible that individuals or small groups of individuals are inspired to engage in violence, but I think they'll do so, by going after a much softer target than a courthouse in the middle of Fulton County. A chunk of his supporters will see that as a license to troll people, maybe to, spray paint their homes or take some sort of light level antagonism to that person. We've seen the people who were accused of voter fraud in Atlanta of fixing the ballots. They've had their lives made miserable.
Well, former US President Donald Trump has criticized a series of indictments against him, slamming the charges and telling supporters in New Hampshire that those behind them are sick. Mr. Trump also vowed to keep talking about the indictments, even as his attorneys clashed with prosecutors in Washington, D.C. over a motion to stop him from sharing evidence in the case. Trump's defense team opposed a request from prosecutors for U.S. District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan to impose a protective order to ensure confidential evidence is not shared publicly by Trump, suggesting he could use the information to intimidate witnesses.
They waited till the election. They waited. And I probably have another one. They say there's a young woman, a young racist in Atlanta. She's a racist. And they say, I guess, they say that she was after a certain gang and she ended up having an affair with the head of the gang or a gang member. And this is a person that wants to indict me. She's got a lot of problems, but she wants to indict me to try and run for some other office. What's going on in this country is, and by the way, wants to indict me for a perfect phone call. This was even better than my perfect call with Ukraine. Remember that call? That was a perfect call. This one's better. This one is more perfect. I challenged the election in Georgia, which I have every right to do, which I was right about, frankly. And they want to indict me because I challenged the election. So does that mean that Hillary Clinton, who challenged the election, does that mean that Stacey Abrams and all of the other, virtually every Democrat challenges the election? Does that mean, or they do the slate of electors? This has been going on since Thomas Jefferson. He wanted to say, but they don't call. They used my word. They took it and they said fake.
Our correspondent Maria Bird in Washington, D.C. joins us now. Hi, Maria. Former President Donald Trump appears unfazed by the legal challenges. Talk to us about this latest indictment that's expected. We can't hear Maria at this time. We'll try to get a hold of her, sort that out. Well, let's go talking to Niger now. We're in Africa, where the U.S. State Department says funding for international military education and also training, peacekeeping operations and foreign military financing programs supporting Niger's counterterrorism capabilities are among the assistance the United States has paused for the military takeover in the country. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters the U.S. is still hopeful, trying to achieve a return to constitutional order in Niger after the military takeover late last month.
Acting Secretary Nuland met yesterday with leaders of the junta and made clear that there was a diplomatic path forward for them if they would choose a return to constitutional order. She also made clear that there would be consequences if they didn't, that there are hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. assistance at stake. As she said last night in the call she had with the press, they were very difficult conversations. She didn't achieve any breakthroughs, and it's not at all clear that they will choose the diplomatic path forward. And so here are a few examples of the types of assistance that are being paused. Approximately $1 million in international military education and training funding, which sends Nigerian military students to the U.S. For training. Our peacekeeping operations funded programs that support infrastructure, training, advisory support, and equipment for counterterrorism and or peacekeeping purposes. We are still hopeful, and we are still trying to achieve a result that is a return to the constitutional order. We hope we don't have to get to that point where we need to make that determination, because our hope is to see the constitutional order restored. We don't believe that window's closed at this point, but it's a very dynamic situation.
In the meantime, Nigeria and West Africa's regional bloc, ECOWAS, says it will prefer a diplomatic and peaceful resolution to the military takeover in Niger. Speaking to journalists in Abuja, spokesperson for President Bola Tinubu, Ajirin Galali, said the bloc would prefer a resolution that is obtained through diplomacy and peace. He added that this preference may change depending on future resolutions discussed at the ECOWAS summit on Thursday.
Diplomacy is the best way forward. In representing the consensus position of the ECOWAS heads of state, he has communicated clearly that he, along with his colleagues in the bloc, would prefer a resolution that was obtained through diplomatic means, through peaceful means, rather than any other. And that will be a position that is maintained going forward, pending any other resolution that may or may not result from the ECOWAS Extraordinary Summit holding on Thursday.
Well, away from Niger, we're back to talking about the United States and former President Trump and the indictment as expected today. We have Maria Bird with us now. Hi, Maria.
Hello.
All right, good to hear from you. Talk to us, because it does appear former President Trump appears unfazed, with this legal challenges. Talk to us about what we're expecting, this latest indictment that is expected.
You are correct. This is the fourth indictment. It's expected that Atlanta will release an indictment dealing with voter fraud and tampering, an investigation as it relates to the Georgia elections and the counting of those votes. And so this is expected to come down. And the former president now has had several indictments over the past few months, as you all noted, most recently in Washington with the January 6th attack. So this is another one that we are expecting him to plead not guilty to, and we will probably see his plane and everything, as we've seen in the weeks before, him going to the courthouse, and we can expect a very similar type of plea of not guilty.
How has all this affected the American people? What reactions have we seen to Mr. Trump's, position?
This is not unexpected. I think that it's been American people knew that this was coming. They knew that he was going to probably be indicted as it relates to the Georgia election issues. And so this is something that I think is not a surprise at all. And at this point, this is number 4. And so those who support former President Trump will continue to likely support him. And those who have had questions about him for the past few years will definitely, probably, this will not change their opinions of him. So I think that this is not going to necessarily have any dramatic impact on the upcoming campaign.
Indeed, you've said the indictment from Georgia would mark, the 4th set of criminal charges this year. Will this impact his bid for presidency? A lot of people say this is still going strong, ahead of 2024.
Yes, he is still expected to be the lead in the Republican Party. He's expected to be the front runner at this time, and it's not expected, if anything, those who support him are showing up at courthouses. And as we've unfortunately heard about the Montgomery, Alabama, many have heard about the brawl that existed there as a result of him coming to campaign in Alabama. So he has very strong supporters and those who are willing to go all the way to the finish line for him if he is able to be the front runner and the candidate for the Republican Party.
With regards to security, where this indictment or the session is taking place, is there a threat of protest in any way?
There will likely be supporters or protesters there. There will likely be, the entire area will be shut down, as it has been in other cities in the past. And they will also have very tight police security in that community during that time as well.
All right, Maria, we look forward to what comes next. Thanks for talking to us. My love to your kids. I could hear them in the background. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
We're in Sudan, where at least 20 civilians have died in the latest clashes between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Response Forces, RSF, in Sudan's greater capital area. The area made up by Khartoum North, and Omdurman has been plagued by violence since mid-April between the warring sides, with the fighting in Omdurman further intensified on Tuesday. The RSF, which has besieged the Sudanese army's engineering headquarters for several days, launched attacks with heavy artillery, tanks and other heavy weapons. The Sudanese army sent reinforcements to break out of the RSF encirclement in the north of Omdurman and carried out large-scale airstrikes against hostile targets. The Sudanese army claimed its operations in Omdurman resulted in hundreds of RSF casualties, while the RSF said over 100 Sudanese soldiers were killed and over 300 wounded. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, is warning that health conditions in Sudan are rapidly deteriorating due to the forcible displacement of over 4 million people. Refugee camps, as well as border entry points and transit centers, neighboring countries are said to be experiencing worsening conditions due to the arrival of people who have been forced to flee. According to UNHCR spokesperson William Spindler, over 144,000 newly displaced refugees from Khartoum arrived in all 10 refugee camps in White Nile State since the conflict started.
With more than 4 million people now forcibly displaced by the Sudan crisis, UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, is deeply worried about deteriorating health conditions across the country, including in refugee camps as well as at border entry points and transit centers in neighboring countries where people forced to flee are arriving. The situation inside Sudan, where UNHCR teams are present, is untenable, as the needs far outweigh what is humanly possible to deliver with the available resources. In White Nile State, a lack of essential medicines, staff and supplies is severely hampering health and nutrition services in all 10 refugee camps, where over 144,000 newly displaced refugees from Khartoum have arrived since the conflict started. As many families have been on the move for weeks with very little food and medicine, rising malnutrition rates, disease outbreaks, and related deaths continue to be observed. In addition, severe cholera and malaria are expected in the coming months due to flooding from the continuing rains and inadequate sanitation facilities.
Well, top tourists from across the African continent converged on the University of South Africa, UNISA, in Pretoria for the 2023 Annual African Bar Association Conference. The event focused on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Topics included global geopolitics, the African alignment, contemporary issues affecting the legal profession in Africa, and the African lawyer under AfCFTA, to name a few. The conference was graced by notable personalities, including the Honourable Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Raymond Zondo, the Chief Justice of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Justice Desmond Edwards. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, has more.
The discourse here is centered around building the legal profession in Africa under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The conference was hosted by the African Bar Association, AFBA, in partnership with the University of South Africa, UNISA. The Vice-Chancellor of UNISA, Professor Puleng Lekambula, advocates for strong institutions in order to address contemporary issues affecting the legal profession in Africa.
It is an opportunity for us to collectively address the importance of transparency in governance, in security, the rule of law, and in shaping Africa's futures. But the question, colleagues, are we creating lawyers or legal practitioners that are committed to advancing Africa's knowledge systems?
We shouldn't come here and make rhetorics and go back home with nothing to write about. A lot has been said about the legal and the intellectual scope, but you permit me look at the political domain, that whatever we will say here, it would only be speeches. If we remain blocked by the barriers called national boundaries, where if we want to leave one African country to a neighboring country, we are subjected to visa conditions which takes us 2 weeks or so.
The Chief Justice of South Africa, Raymond Zondo, cites the role of the judiciary in achieving the African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
There is no specific provision provided for the role and place of the courts. The courts, nevertheless, will deal with certain types of disputes.
While we've had many conferences in attempt to realize AfTA, implementation remains an issue, raising doubts about whether these conversations will result in any actual measures or answers. I chatted with some delegates here, and this is what they said.
I think we have a long way to go in that. Our legal education historically has been paneled after the European nations, whether it's the common law system, whether it's the civil law system. and the colonial influences are still very much there. So we need to begin to look at our university curriculum and say, look, if you want to train a lawyer, yes, it's important to have a universal knowledge of law in accordance with common law systems and all that. But how do we import into those training systems the essentials that are rudimentary for countries in Africa? How do we make an African lawyer truly African, be able to hold his own with pride?
But right now, I think that with the level of collaboration globally, looking at the Europe, looking at America and the rest of them, how they collaborate effectively, Africa has risen, Africa has woken up. This is the time for us to embrace the future of Africa globally and establish this trend. And that is why the African Bar Association is keen into this, so that lawyers who have capacity to have some of these things enforced will put their voices on it.
Throughout the event, prominent figures and key speakers engaged in discussions to advance the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The first day, the conference was rounded off by the presentation from the University of South Africa Choir. From Pretoria, South Africa, Innocent Samos, Channels Television News.
Away from South Africa to the Middle East, Syria has extended permission for the United Nations to deliver aid via two Turkish border crossings for 3 months, while a U.S. exemption expired on Tuesday that allowed some transactions linked to humanitarian assistance after a deadly earthquake in February. After the earthquake killed more than 50,000 people in Turkey and Syria, Damascus initially allowed the UN to dispatch aid to opposition-held areas of the country using the two border crossings from Turkey for 3 months. That was renewed in May and has now been extended till November 13th. The United Nations says it greatly welcomes the extension.
We greatly welcome the extension of permission by the government of Syria through a letter we received to the Emergency Relief Coordinator on the 6th of August, which will allow us to utilize the Bab al-Salam and Al-Rai border crossings until the 13th of November. So we have received that letter from them. Meanwhile, the government of Syria has responded to a letter from Undersecretary General Martin Griffiths concerning Bab al-Hawa. We stand ready to resume aid operations through the Bab al-Hawa crossing as soon as possible. The UN and our humanitarian partners will also continue to deliver the urgently needed aid, as I mentioned, through the Bab al-Salam and Al-Rai border crossings. At this stage, basically, we're standing ready to resume our aid operations. I don't have a confirmation to give at this point of being able to use Bab al-Hawa, but we're in talks with them, and we'll see what progress we can make. But certainly, we've received communications and have been in touch with them.
So, I mean, but I'm trying just to understand. So when you say you're standing ready to assume your operation, does that mean that the conditions or that the obstacles you were facing regarding delivering aid are now not there anymore, or?
At this stage, we're still working to resolve those obstacles. We're hopeful that we can do so, and we do stand ready to resume operations if those obstacles are overcome.
Member states of the United Nations are calling on Syria to comply with chemical weapons conventions after a UN official told the Security Council there are information gaps on Syrian chemical weapons. Adede Giebo, deputy to the High Representative of the United Nations Office of Disarmament Affairs, told the Council Syria's declaration in accordance with the Chemical Weapons Convention cannot be considered accurate and complete. A joint inquiry of the UN and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons determined that the Syrian government used a nerve agent Syrian in an April 4, 2017 attack and also used several times chlorine as a weapon. Western nations have called on Syria to destroy its chemical weapons stockpiles. Syria and its close ally Russia, which provides military support to Assad's forces, deny using chemical weapons and blame insurgents. Damascus accuses the West of using the issue of chemical weapons as a means to criticize Syria.
Full cooperation by the Syrian Arab Republic with the OPCW Technical Secretariat is essential in closing all outstanding issues. Considering the identified gaps, inconsistencies, and discrepancies that remain unresolved, At this time, the OPCW Technical Secretariat assesses that the declaration submitted by the Syrian Arab Republic still cannot be considered accurate and complete in accordance with the Chemical Weapons Convention.
Know that the regime never planned to comply with the CWC and that it willfully hid chemical weapons from the OPCW. In fact, since acceding to the CWC in September of 2013, the UN and OPCW's investigative mechanisms confirmed Syria used chemical weapons against its own people in 9 subsequent attacks. The Assad regime has repeatedly lied to the international community and the investigators examining these incidents.
We call upon all Council members to join us in urging the Syrian government to fully comply with its obligations under the CWC and Security Council Resolution 2118 and eliminate its entire chemical weapons program.
Still to come on the program. With chemical weapons, Japan marks 78th anniversary of Nagasaki atomic bombing. Happy details from Minister. Japan has held a ceremony to mark the 78th anniversary of the Nagasaki atomic bombing, with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida addressing attendees via video message. This year, the ceremony was relocated to be held indoors instead of the Nagasaki Peace Park due to concerns about Typhoon Kanun as it passed off Japan's western coast. The Nagasaki atomic bombing came 3 days after a US B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, carried out the world's first nuclear attack in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, during World War II. The 2 bombings killed more than 215,000 people, with thousands more dying later of injuries and radiation-related illness. Japan surrendered 6 days later on August the 15th, ending the military aggression that brought it into World War II. Still in Asia, in the flood-hit Chinese city of Zhengzhou, workers sprayed disinfectant at an agricultural products wholesale market as flood waters receded to prevent the spread of disease. Drone footage on state broadcaster CCTV showed police personnel excavators clearing sludge while post-flood disinfection works were underway. Hebei province, which shares a border with the capital Beijing, was struck by more than a year's rainfall last week from storms that followed Typhoon Doksuri, with Zhengzhou being one of the worst-hit cities. Northern China warned of crop and animal diseases breaking out as flood waters receded from rural areas, while some cities struggled to restore drinking water supplies after the worst flooding in 6 decades. 3 Swiss scouts have been injured in a bus accident while on their way to Seoul after having been evacuated from the Jamboree campsite due to an approaching typhoon. A tour bus carrying 38 people, including 36 Swiss scouts, with a leader and bus driver, collided with a local bus in Suncheon, South Jeolla province. Local media reports said 3 of the Swiss scouts suffered minor bruises. Other injuries in the accident, with 2 of them being taken to a nearby hospital. 5 passengers on the local bus were also injured and were being treated at hospital. South Korea yesterday evacuated the majority of teenage scouts from their campsite ahead of an approaching typhoon, a major disruption to the World Scout Jamboree, which has been marred by illness and criticism of its organization and facilities. Los Angeles municipal employees went on a 24-hour strike on Tuesday to protest what their union calls bad faith bargaining by government officials over a new contract, the latest in a series of job actions affecting the city. Hundreds of city workers, including mechanics, lifeguards, traffic officers, marched in picket lines at City Hall and the Los Angeles International Airport, saying city management has engaged in unfair labor practices during negotiations over recruitment, retention, and hiring issues. The union represents about 11,000 city workers.
This unfair labor practice brought me out here. This is the blatant disrespect that the city showed us when they stopped bargaining with us and they just sat back and did nothing. Well, we brought everything. We gave them all the paperwork. We went after it, and then they did nothing. So we're here to show our solidarity.
We want better opportunities, better working conditions. We want better pay mainly. Because we feel that we are underpaid for the jobs that we do.
We all do a wonderful job. We're all needed. We're essential workers out here. And we worked through the pandemic. We were out here. We never wavered. And so just bargain in good faith. And that's all we're asking. And when you don't bargain in good faith, this is what happens.
We were supposed to go to the table earlier this year to hash out some tentative agreements. And they said, never mind, we'll see you later in the year. They broke their promise. We filed an unfair labor practice. They brought people to the table that didn't even have the authority to bargain. Bad practice, bad faith. So we're saying come back to the table. Now we've got the attention of the folks in City Council, the public, the community, and we're ready to go back to the table in good faith. A day like today really sends a message. It's amazing, the solidarity. It's the summer of solidarity. So obviously, we have SAG-AFTRA here, Unite here, the teachers. My phone's been blowing up this last week. What can we do to help? It's never been a better time, a more popular time to be a labor union. Today, us shutting the city of LA down shows that firsthand.
And Canadian rapper Tory Lanez has been sentenced to 10 years for shooting fellow musician Megan Thee Stallion. Lanez shot Grammy winner Megan Thee Stallion in the feet during an argument between the pair after a party in 2020. He was found guilty on 3 gun-related charges in December and has been held in jail since. The shooting, which polarized the music world, left Megan Thee Stallion needing surgery to remove bullet fragments from her foot. The LA District Attorney, George Gascon, said after the verdict that her fame has brought an important spotlight on the issue of violence against women.
Over the past 3 years, Mr. Peterson has engaged in a pattern of conduct that was intended to intimidate Ms. Pete, silence her, and keep her from defending and bringing her truth out. Despite the physical violence, verbal attacks, and attempts at public humiliation, Ms. Pete remained strong and shared the events of that fateful night with the jury and the world. The fact that Ms. Pete is a successful entertainer has brought a spotlight on the important issue of violence against women. There are many people in our community that endure acts of violence every day from people close to them and feel reluctant to come forward when this happens. I hope that Ms. Pete's bravery gives hope to those that feel helpless. I want to assure all the victims of crime and members of our community that we are here to help and support them in their journey to healing. I'd like to thank the jury for their time and for critically and objectively viewing the evidence in this case. Jurors play a critical role in the criminal legal system, and I'm thankful for their work.
This has been a long and hard road for her. Not only did the defendant do the heinous act of shooting her, he then subjected her to 2.5 years of hell. He called her a liar. He intimidated her. He harassed her. I hope that future victims can look to Megan and her courage and also find the courage to come forward and get the justice that they deserve.
And finally on the program, a bike thief in San Diego had a double stroke of luck when he found an open garage full of bikes, as well as a very affectionate guard dog who just wanted to play. Surveillance footage from the garage released by the San Diego Police Department showed the thief walking away with a bike and then rolling the bike back into the open garage to take a moment to interact with a friendly golden retriever who had wandered in from the main house. The video shows the dog playing with the thief, rolling over for belly rubs. The thief can be heard telling the dog, "You're the coolest dog ever," as its tail wags furiously. The thief then casually strolls away with the bike, we understand, as the dog looks on, before appearing to follow his late-night playmate out of the garage. According to the police, the theft took place July 15th at around 10:40 p.m. local time.
Dude, remember the coolest dog ever.
I mean, what do you call that? That's the world today. Many thanks for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Bye for now.